I've seen spirit ever since the age of 3 years old. My whole family was seeing them at that time. We grew up in a little town in New Jersey, right on the Delaware River, where the Hessians fought. There was a little battlefield. There was one time when my sister was getting ready for school and I was getting ready, and I saw my sister in the bathroom with my mom. My mom was going to do my sister's hair. So they went up to a door that had a full-length mirror on it, and when they walked up to the door, there was another woman standing in the mirror. She had a colonial outfit on. There was another time when my two brothers and I were downstairs watching TV, and my sister's record player turned on. Now, this is back in the 1970s. So it was back then when you had to take the record and you pick it up and you put it on the little post, and then you flip the switch, and the record would drop down, and the needle would come across and play a record. Whatever was there was switching records. It was taking records off the post and putting another one on. And my one brother sent me and my other brother upstairs to turn that off. So we ran up those steps as quickly as we could. We turned it off and came down as quickly as we could. But my other brother just acted like there was nothing wrong. But I was running down those steps to get to him because he was my older brother, and he would protect me from these things. There was another time when my friend wanted to come over the house. I was around maybe 10 or 12 years old, because he wanted to witness something. Nothing was really happening throughout the day, and then we were at the kitchen table eating some sandwiches, and then the stereo turned on, and then the volume just went way all the way up to the top. I saw my friend turn whiter than any ghost that I've ever seen in my life, and he ran out the door. He never came back. He'd like to tell that story at school, but I would sit there and just giggle all the time, because watching him be as white as a ghost and run out the door was funny to me. So we got used to this type of stuff going on, ashtrays moving and glasses moving around the house. And then it was when I was around 17 years old, my parents and my dad got a new job, and we moved down to Delaware. And it was at this time no one else was seeing him as much as I was. There was an instance where I came home. I used to play drums in a rock band. When I did, it was around 5 o'clock in the morning, and I laid down in bed. And when I did, something laid down next to me. I got up to look around and see what was there. There was nothing. And each time that I laid down, the bed would depress and something was laying down next to me. The pillow would squish down. The bed was moving. It was around that fifth time when I looked around again, and when I did, whatever was there picked up the blanket that was on top of me and brought it up to the ceiling, and then it shook it above me, and then it dropped it on top of me. And then for 2 years after that, I slept on the couch downstairs because I was scared. It was just happening so much at this point into my 20s, into my 30s, into my 40s. I never not had an experience where I wasn't seeing something or hearing something. It was right around when I was turning 50 years old. My now wife at this point went away on vacation for 2 weeks out to San Francisco to visit her daughter. And for those 2 weeks, I saw everything you could imagine in my home that was going on in a scary movie. I had green and red mist pouring out of the walls. I had red skulls floating around with red eyes and fangs. I had these clouds that would come out of the corner of the room by the ceiling. It would come out one night be red, the next night be green, and then blue, and then yellow, and then orange. Each night after that, it would be blue with black stripes, red with black stripes, green with black stripes. I had a cloud form above my head, right above the bed, the edge of the bed, and opened up to a window of blackness. And then I saw these two skeleton arms come out of the window. Strange enough to me, because I see so much all the time, the arms didn't have any hands. It just two nubs at the end, and they came out, and then they pulled out an entire body, and then the skeleton head had bigger eyes than normal, just those big black holes. And it was looking around the room and looked at me, and then it went above me, and then it went behind me, and then it disappeared. I had 7-foot skeletons walking around the house. I had seen the famed Hat Man come to my house. I went down in the basement because my cat was downstairs, and I went to go get him. I said, "Come on, buddy, it's time to go upstairs." And he looked at me. He looked to his right. I looked to my left, and I saw a wall of blackness appear in the center of the room. And then I saw a man walk out of it, and the man had a wide rim hat and a long coat. I couldn't see his face, but I could see his facial features. Something that I noticed I thought was strange was he was walking across the floor in a perfect stride, but he had no feet. And then he just went across the room and then into the corner and went through the wall. When I turned back, the wall of blackness just closed up and looked at my cat, and he looked at me like, what the heck was that? And I didn't know either. So after all that, my wife came home and she told me about her adventures when she was out in California. And then I told her about mine. My wife, being a nurse, she thought maybe because I'm diabetic, maybe my medications were causing me a diabetic psychosis. It was that point she was kind of questioning the relationship at that point. We weren't married yet, but we were going to get married. So she had some doubts. And then it was 3 days later after that, she started seeing some of the same things, experiencing some of the same things. So we started investigating as anyone would do. We went on the internet and we tried to find some alternative means of taking care of this. Someone said pour salt around the room. Well, as I know now, all that does is make your room salty. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't harm a non-physical being because it's not going to transpose into a non-physical realm. You can put crosses up, but as I know also, a cross is a form of punishment. How are you going to make something negative go away with a form of punishment? You're not. Using the Bible. Again, the Bible has rape and murder in it. How is that going to make something negative go away? It doesn't. We sought out help, and I found a paranormal group come. The only part about it was when they first got there, they showed up with their little van, and I thought to myself, I don't want to be this kind of famous. Everyone in the neighborhood's going to think that they're living next to a poltergeist home. Unfortunately for them, they were. So at this point, they came in the house, set up all their gear. They had these little boxes that had little lights on it and little wires sticking out of it. They set up cameras everywhere. One woman, she had some type of digital camera she was taking pictures with. Another man had a video camera. And there was another guy who was just observing, and the other guy was asking questions and walking around the house. Now, the little boxes that had the lights on it, I said, what do they do? And he said, well, Spirit, they create static electricity. I said, how do you mean? And he rubbed his hand on the couch, and he put it over top of the box, and when he did, it lit up. And it made this little noise, and I was like, oh, well, that's neat. So he put them all around the house, and he put them in front of the doorways. And then he said, so where do you have most of the activity going on? I said, well, pick a place. Let's go in wherever you want to go in the house. It's all around the entire house. And he said, let's go into the bedroom. And I said, fine. So I walked into the bedroom, and when I did, every one of those little boxes lit up. They just blew when I walked through. When they walked through, nothing. I was looking at them like, what's going on? And they were shrugging their shoulders, looking at me like they didn't know why that was happening either. So, and then one of the crew members, the guy with the video camera, said, I feel drawn to go into the closet. Let's go in there. I said, okay. He said, you have activity going there? I said, yeah, I have activity everywhere. So we open up the closet, to walk-in closet, and I walk in, and he walks in, and he's looking around. And then within seconds, he says, I got to get out of here. I'm about to get sick. And he runs out and said, just sit on the bed. And he sat on the bed. And I said, do you feel okay? He's like, yeah, I'm better now. I'm better. I said, do you want to go back in? He said, yeah, let's go try it again. We walk back in, and the same thing happens again. And then he runs back out and sits on the bed. And I said, you okay? He said, yeah. He said, how come it's not happening to you? I said, I don't know. You're the expert. That's what you're here for, to tell me these things. They wanted to go down in the basement. So we walked downstairs in the basement, and there was just an eerie presence down there. And as we're walking around, I'm standing there talking to one guy, and then I walk away, and he says, Mr. Jackson, can you come back here? I said, sure, what's up? He said, stand right here, right in front of me. And I said, okay, what's with here? And he said, well, you have a mirror behind you. I said, yeah. He said, just kind of turn around and look at the mirror. When I did, the mirror was vibrating. It was up against the wall. And then he said, just walk away. And I walked away, and it stopped. And then I walked back, and it started vibrating again. So they took some video. They took some pictures. We went into a back room. And when we went in the back room, they turned out the lights because they wanted to ask some questions. And they asked, is anyone here? And when they asked that, you could hear 3 knocks right above us on the ceiling. And they said, did anybody do that? Anybody? And I'm like, you can't reach the ceiling, so how would you be able to do that? He asked the question again, and 3 more knocks came through. Immediately after the 3 knocks came through, a light lit up on the floor. Everyone stopped, and they, like a Christmas tree light. And he said, did anybody turn on a light? I said, you're standing on a rug floor. Where would there be lights? My wife was over by the light switch. He said, can you turn on the light switch? We turned it on. They looked around. There was no lights around. They said they wanted to go back upstairs. We were talking, and a young lady was taking pictures. She said to the other members, she said, "Here, come here, you got to look at this." And I said, "What do you got?" And she said, "Well, we're not supposed to show you until the big reveal, Mr. Jackson, but you really ought to see this." And I said, "Okay." And she showed me pictures of me standing there by myself or me with one of the other members. And then she had pictures of the other members by themselves. Every time there was a picture of me, there was 15 to 20 light orbs completely surrounding me. When it was just a picture of them, there was nothing. Finally, they wanted to do another test where they wanted me to go into my bedroom and pretend I was sleeping because this was all done at nighttime. And I said, okay, so I'll go in the bedroom. And they said, we'll come in a couple minutes. I go in, I lay down, I put the covers over me, I turn the lights out. And they walk in with this thing called an ovulus, a spirit box. And when they turned on the box, it immediately started spitting out words. It said, Wendy, Michael, Paul, Helen, unique, special, energy, light. One time it even said the word road, like a street said road. And when it did, a car went past the house. And then they started asking questions. They asked questions for 10 minutes. When I went to go out and see what was going on, they were standing there and my wife was looking at me like something was wrong and they were all huddled up. They finally turned around. And when they turned around, I said to them, hey, did you get everything? I mean, you heard all that stuff inside of there, right? I mean, because my wife and I at that point, we were glad they were just there because now other people were experiencing this thing too. And we knew at that point we're not crazy because we thought we were going crazy. So they said, yes, we got all that. And I said, so what'd you think? And he said, well, there's an issue. And I said, what's the issue? There wasn't anything harmful or anything horrible going on in the room. And they said, no, but whenever we use that box, we can only get it to spit out a word or two. And I said, okay. He said, it never says sentences. And it doesn't say sentences for 10 minutes. We timed it exactly 10 minutes. He said, it was as though we were having an intelligent conversation. Every time we asked a question, the answer came right back. He said, that never happens for us. We've been doing this for 5 years, and that's never happened to us. And I said, okay. He said, well, we have to figure this all out. And then we'll come back in about 2 weeks with a big reveal of everything that we found, the evidence that we found. I said, well, it seems like you found a lot of evidence. And he said, yeah, it is a lot. And we need to figure this out. So we'll come back. I said, so what am I going to do in the meantime? He said, well, here, I have some things. Some websites I want you to look up and then play this with a Bluetooth speaker. And these are some prayers that will help you anytime that this stuff comes around. Plus, I take the spray bottle and I said, what's that? He said, oh, it's holy water. Well, I soon found out that holy water is just water. No man can bless water. You just can't. And I tried playing the prayer things, and that wasn't working either. I was told they would come back in 2 weeks. I didn't hear from them for 6 weeks. When I finally got a hold of them, I said, so when are you going to come back? And he said, well, I can't get the team together to come back to your home. And I said, why not? He said, the moment that we got on your front lawn, they quit. They don't want to do this anymore. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we don't normally get that much information. He said, as much information we got from your house, it usually takes us 10 or 15 homes to get all that, not just one. He said, they're afraid to come into your home. I said, well, can you come back? He said, no, I'm also afraid to. And I said, you're not helping me. I thought you were going to come here and help me and figure this out for me. He said, I don't know what you got going on in there, but he said that it's not something we want to delve into. At that point, my wife and I were feeling dumbfounded. And I said, we've gone down this road with these teams coming in the house. We were contacting another one, but we let them go because they just wanted to come and look for information so they could have it for their website. So I contacted mediums. I started doing that route. And I found 5 of them. And none of them knew each other. But each one that I spoke to, they all told me the same story about me, about everything that was going on with me and going on in my home. But not just going on in my home, because it was now at this point that things were happening everywhere I went. I eventually hooked up with one medium who said she wanted me to come to see her show because she wanted me to see how she does it. I was still dumbfounded of why would she want me to see how she does it? I didn't understand what was going on here. So I bought some tickets and my wife and I went to the show. We walked into the door, and immediately as we walked into the door, the woman was standing on stage. She locked eyes with me and my wife. She stared at me, and then followed us as we were going through the room until we sat down. She proceeded to tell everybody in the show how she does things and how she wanted everyone to be and to sit calmly and don't have your arms crossed or your legs crossed. I found out later that means nothing. She started telling everybody, okay, I'm going to allow spirit to come in. Each one will show me something, some pictures of something, and then I'm going to say what I'm seeing and then see if that resonates with anybody. So this spirit come through, and this lady, she went through the whole reading with her. She said, I'm having an issue. She said, I have one spirit that keeps coming through. He keeps trying to get to the front of the line, and I keep telling him he has to wait to his turn. He's only going to be second in line, but he's trying to get past this other woman. She gets to the second person, the second soul that comes through, and she says, his name is Robert, but he goes by the name Bob as well. He wears flannel shirts, but he wears a business suit when he goes to work. Does that resonate with anybody? The way he passed away was he fell down. And that's when I stood up and I said, I think that's for me. I said, my father's name is Robert, but he goes by Bob. He wears a business suit when he would go to work in flannel shirts. When he fell down, he was going up a flight of steps and it moved his brainstem. Okay. She said, well, who is Sarah? And I said, Sarah? She said, yeah, the one who had to make the big decision. And I said, my niece, Sarah? She said, no, the big decision for your dad to pass away. And I said, oh, well, that's my mom. My mom's name is Joan. Middle name is Sarah. She's the one I had to tell the doctors to pull the plug. And she said, well, he's also showing me someone standing with looks like medical scrubs on and a stethoscope and standing by a school bus. And I see some prison bars. I said, yeah, that's me. I went to school for medical records and now I work at a prison. So when this was taking place and she answered some other things, I knew this was now real because there's no way she would have known my mom's middle name. At the end of the show, I said to my wife, we got to go down there. I got to talk to this lady because I got to find out what's going on. So I go up on the stage and she turns around and she says, hi, I talked to you on the phone a couple of weeks ago. She goes, I'm so glad that you showed up. She said, you and I need to talk. And then she looked at me like I was 7 years old and she said, stay here. Don't move. You and I need to talk. We got to wait till all these people leave. And I said, oh, like I was in trouble, like I was in seventh grade or something. When they left, she said to me, so I understand that you're able to see spirit. I said, lady, it's like being in a room with 1,000 people, except nobody leaves and more just keep coming in. That's how many I'm seeing all the time. Every day, everywhere I go, I see them. She said, well, they're coming to you, and that's why you see so many. And I said, why would they come to me? And she said, as I also know, spirits see your body frame. That's all they see, but they see a light inside of you, and that's your soul. They see that. But some people have a soul that's brighter than others. But you have the brightest one I've ever seen. She said, I don't even see your body frame as they don't either. All you look like is like a light bulb. And I was like, okay, what's that supposed to mean? She said, well, they're coming to you because they believe that you're the light into heaven. She said, you're that bright. She said, when you came into the room, I saw you come into the room. I could feel you on the outside of that door. And when you came through, I saw you go through the room. I said, yeah, my wife and I looked at you like, that was kind of creepy, you know? So, but it was a bit much. And she said, well, they're coming to you because they want you to help them. And I said, help them in what way? How am I supposed to help them? She said, to cross over. And I said, why would I help them to cross over? What is going on here? What are you talking about? And she said, oh, honey, you just don't know. She said, you're just a medium who's untrained. And I said, medium? What do you mean I'm a medium? She said, that's why spirit are coming to you because they want your help. That's why you see so many. She said, you have an ability to see them. And I said, yeah, I don't just see people either. I see dogs, cats, horses, cows, fish. I see what looks like other beings from other worlds. I see everything. And she said, yeah, you need to have a big talk with God. And I said, why would I have a talk with him? She said, to decide what you're going to do next. Are you going to move forward with this or are you not? And I said, with what? She said, with being a medium. That's what you are. You got to get this figured out because if you don't, it's just going to drive you crazy. When we got home, I said to her, how am I supposed to have a talk with God? And my wife says to me, as she does all the time, puts everything into perspective for me. Why don't you just talk to him like you would any other time? You can just do that. And I said, you're right. I went into the bedroom. I turned off all the lights. I sat on the edge of the bed and I said, God, if this is what you want me to do, I'll do anything that you want me to do. If this is what you want me to be, I'll be this. I'll go anywhere." And when I said I'll go anywhere, I was kind of like almost fearing maybe he's going to send me somewhere away from my wife. So I said, "I'll do whatever you want. I'll go wherever you want. I'll be wherever you want. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it 110%. But I need help. Need you to help me with this because I can't get this thing figured out." I walked out of the room and I said to my wife, "Okay, I did it. We'll just have to wait and see what happens." And then the very next day, everything changed.